Hello and welcome back to Russ's Movie Corner. My name is Russ, and as you can see, I am sitting in front of my movie corner. I have my Guardian the Galaxy t-shirt on, my Risen movie right next to me, and judging by the frame around me, we are back taking down another atheist. Today, back on the chopping block is Kristi Burke, and her video, 7 Times Paul Contradicted Jesus. I just wanted to mention, I have my Risen movie here because it was just Easter yesterday as of recording this. So, wherever you are, happy Easter. If you have not seen this movie, I would highly recommend it. It is really good. Risen is about a guy who, he's a Roman centurion, and he goes and gets, he goes and, he allows Joseph of Arimathea to kind of take the body of Jesus down from the cross. They put him in, shows them, putting the stone in front of it and then stamping it and doing all that stuff. And he tells the guys, you're gonna watch this thing because I don't trust these, I don't trust these followers of his. They're gonna try to steal his body, blah blah blah. Then he goes away, comes back, and notices that the tomb is open. And he's like, "Who of you opened this? Who opened this?" And they're like, "We didn't open it, sir. Well, we don't know what happened. It just opened by itself." And they're like, "Yeah, right. One of you opened this tomb." And so then he goes on this journey, running around trying to figure out, where the body of Jesus is. And I just have to tell you, man, it's amazing. The acting, Joseph Fiennes plays the centurion. And I think it was, Cliff Curtis plays Jesus. Tom Felton's in it too. The guy who played Draco Malfoy. In fact, you can kind of see him on the back cover there. It was a really good movie. I have not actually watched it in a while, so I'll probably pop it in and watch it this week after I get done. Maybe next week after I get done with my set of videos this week. So, back to Kristi Burke's video. So, when last we left off, we were talking about how she was talking about how, Jesus did this and Jesus did that. Jesus elevates women and Jesus does this and Jesus does that. And then Paul says, "I don't permit a woman to teach." And I read from Chuck Missler. Okay. And basically, what a lot of people kind of fail to understand is that, yes, Paul does say that he does not permit a woman to teach. That is, to be a preacher or an overseer or an elder. Those three terms can be used interchangeably in a church. Okay? Now, in chapter 3 of 1 Timothy, okay, Paul actually lays out the qualifications for an overseer, aka a pastor or an elder. Okay, again, those three terms can be used interchangeably. Okay, the saying is trustworthy. This is 3 starting in chapter 3, starting in verse 1. The saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. Therefore, an overseer must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own household well, with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he might not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. Okay? And one of the main fallacies that people like Kristi Burke tend to commit is, just because, Jesus didn't come right out and say, "I don't permit a woman to teach," doesn't mean that he permitted a woman to, become the pastor. In fact, his actions were totally opposite of that. Because in all of his appointments, when he built up his disciples, he never had a woman, and he never had a woman in his inner circle, his 12 disciples, okay? And he never had, he never went to, say, Mary Magdalene and said, hey, on this rock I will build my church. Okay, he said that to Peter, not to Mary Magdalene. Yes, it's true that he had, some of the women deliver the message of his rising again and all of that kind of stuff. But that in and of itself is not the same thing as what, Kristi would have you believe in saying, yeah, but Jesus was just so elevating the women. Now, he did elevate women in certain respects, but he was not allowing them to, go around and preach the word to churches. Because again, they were teaching in private. Okay? So, what I'm going to do is, let's run a little bit of the video, and then what I'm going to do is I have marked, pretty much starting in, the book of Acts, okay, I have kind of taken a bunch of things that Paul has either said about women or done with women, okay, in what they do. He's called out women by name, just to show you that he's not like a total misogynistic punk. He doesn't think that women are, fourth-class citizens that aren't worth our time or anything like that, okay? He never, ever, ever said that or did that, okay, contrary to what she would have you believe. So, let's run just a tiny bit of this, and then we'll come back and we'll pause it.
He didn't share that message. And you'd think that if Paul was just continuing the message of Jesus, that Jesus would have said something like this, but he didn't. He showed no indication of seeing women as the weaker vessel.
Yeah, he did. Okay? Because he protected women from certain things. Okay, we mentioned that last time in John chapter 8. He protected the woman caught in adultery. Okay? He cast demons out of Mary Magdalene. Okay? He told John to take his own mother, Jesus' own mother, into his household. Okay? At the cross, when he was hanging on the cross, he was like, woman, here is your son, talking to John, talking about John to his mother, and he says, John, here is your mother. That was a way for Jesus to say, yo, take my mom into your household. Okay? So, yeah, he did absolutely see them as the weaker vessel in terms of they needed to be protected by men. And since she can't see that much is obvious, okay, then I don't know what I can do to make her understand that it's not that men think that women are just the most weakest people on the planet and they just have to be sheltered and thrown into a house and never allowed to leave, never allowed to do this, never allowed to do that. That's not what we're saying, okay? We're saying that, just like before when Paul was talking about this, he said, for Adam was formed first, then Eve, okay? And Adam was not deceived, but it was Eve who was deceived and caused the sin. Even though the man stood there and went right along with his wife, it was the woman who was deceived into eating the fruit in the Garden of Eden, okay? And that's the justification that Paul is giving, okay? And Jesus, by his own actions, see here again, this is the fallacy of omission, okay? The fallacy of not every word has been said, okay? Bart Ehrman actually commits this fallacy a lot when he goes, well, Mark doesn't come right out and say, that, Jesus said, I and the Father are one. So, there was some kind of a thing over here, and and he goes, and there's been some theologians that are like, no, Bart, he actually does say, in so many words, okay, he's but not saying I and the Father are one, but he is making comparisons to the Father. He is walking up and forgiving sins, which is something that only God can forgive. Okay? So how could he be forgiving sins if he's just a man? He'd have to be God to forgive sins. Okay? Which is why he turns to the people when they're like, oh, blasphemy, and he's like, which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven, or take up your mat and walk? So he tells the paralytic, take up your mat and walk, and the guy gets up and starts walking. Okay? We have a ton of miracles like that all throughout Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Because each one of the Gospels was written to a slightly different audience. Okay? And so each one tells the same story just from a different point of view for a different audience. Okay? If they all told the exact same story with the exact same words, we would have had to sit there and say, all right, who did they talk to? Who told them? Who coached them in what to say? Okay? This is something that, I think it's J. Werner Wallace, in his book Cold Case Christianity, one of the things that he brings up is the fact that he was a cold case detective for many years, and he realized very early on when he would go through some of the court cases for some of these cold cases, some of the testimonies, some of the eyewitness accounts, he would go back and talk to those people, and if they were all saying the exact same thing, okay, not like, oh, it's like, oh, it's been 20 years, I can't remember this, I can't remember that, blah, blah, blah. No, if they were saying the exact same story, the exact same way, it means they've been coached in what to say and how to talk, okay? And a lot of times that's how they get people to confess to crimes and do all this crazy stuff, is because they do that, and then people go, and then the jury should be taking notes and going, who got to them? Okay? They're telling the exact same story here, and like word for word, like they're telling the exact same story. And you don't want to see that in eyewitness accounts. In fact, most prosecuting attorneys, most defense attorneys, most cops will tell you, if you hear the same story, word for word, they've likely been coached, and they're not a reliable witness. So the fact that we have, well, actually we have more than just the 4 gospel accounts, because we have a bunch of different gospel accounts, but the fact that each gospel account is different, okay, slightly different. The words might be similar, okay, what Jesus said, how Jesus said things, might be similar, but they're not the exact same story word for word. That's the point, okay? So Jesus doesn't have to come out and say, I don't permit a woman to teach. His own actions prove that he doesn't permit a woman to be a preacher, an elder, an overseer, okay? Because again, he's not saying that women can't teach. Neither is Paul, okay? Paul is just saying, I don't permit a woman to be an elder, overseer, pastor, okay? That's what he's saying. So now, let's talk a little bit here about Paul, okay? And let's look at some of the stuff here, okay? So, after Paul's first missionary journey, okay, he went out, and he and Barnabas went out, and they did some things, and John Mark, the same writer of the Gospel of Mark, took off on him, okay? So Paul was not a very big fan of Mark. But Barnabas, being Mark's uncle, was like, I want to give him a second chance. And Paul's like, no. So Barnabas decided he was going to take Mark, and they sailed away to Cyprus, and Paul takes Silas, and they depart, and they go on Paul's second missionary journey. Okay. Then when they came to Derbe and to Lystra, a disciple was there named Timothy, son of a Jewish woman who was a believer, but his father was a Greek. Okay. So they come with him. Then they go to Macedonia. It says, so setting sail from Troas, this is in verse 11 of chapter 16 of Acts. So setting sail from Troas, we made a direct voyage to Samothrace, and the following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is a leading city in the district of Macedonia, and a Roman colony. We remained in the city some days, and on the Sabbath day we went outside the gate to the riverside, where we supposed there was a place of prayer, and we sat down and spoke to the women who had come together. One who heard us was a woman named Lydia from the city of Thyatira, a seller of purple goods, who was a worshipper of God. The Lord opened her heart to pay full attention to what was said by Paul, and after she was baptized, and her household as well, she urged us, saying, if you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay. And she prevailed upon us. Okay? And so then Paul and Silas get thrown into prison because a woman comes in and she starts pestering Paul because she has a demonic spirit because she's a medium. Okay? And they're like, hey, what are you doing? Okay? And then the Philippian jailer becomes converted because Paul and Silas witnessed to him. Okay? It's what they did. So that's kind of the whole point, is that Paul spends most of his ministry, okay, going around to various people and talking to them, okay, and, trying to get people to understand the gospel message, okay? So it's not like, if Paul was truly misogynistic, when he went to the place and saw a bunch of women sitting there, he probably wouldn't have sat there and been like, whatever, women, get out of here. No, he sat down and started talking with them, and a woman who was a believer in God, which means she was probably some kind of a Jew, she probably heard some of the Jews speak, okay, but being that she wasn't Jewish, okay, she believed in God, but she didn't know exactly what that all meant. And so Paul is basically just prevails upon her, tells her the gospel message, she believes, she's baptized, she goes home, gets her whole entire household, brings them out to the thing, they get saved, and they get baptized. Okay? Now, important note, the baptism isn't the important part here. Okay? The actual important part is the saving, okay? She became saved, and then the baptism is the outward showing of the saving, okay? Because you're baptized in the Spirit, okay? We in the Christian church, we call it, we have two types of baptisms, okay? We have the outward showing of the baptism, we have the inward baptism, okay? The outward showing of the baptism is when you go to a church and you see somebody there, or maybe you're down in the park and you see some people and a guy takes a person and dips him in the water, or they dip him in a pool, or they dip him in something, okay? And then they pull him up and they say, I baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Okay? That's an outward showing of their faith, okay? That is them declaring that I have been saved by Jesus and now I want to declare that to the world by being baptized, okay? And it's not like a prideful thing. It's not like we're standing there going, woo, you being baptized. No, it's not a prideful thing. We're not sitting there being like, well, I've been baptized 3 times. No, it's not. That's not what we're doing here, okay? You get baptized as an outward showing of that commitment, okay? The inward is the baptism of the Holy Spirit. That's what happens when you become a Christian, okay? When you place your faith in Jesus Christ, when you become a Christian, you get a baptism of the Holy Spirit, okay? That Holy Spirit comes upon you, and when you read the scriptures, when you talk to God, when you talk to the Holy Spirit, that's what comes upon you, okay? So now, I want to move on to Romans chapter 16. I've got a couple of verses here, okay? I'm going to be reading 1 through 7, okay? And then I'm going to be reading 15 and 16, okay? I commend to you our sister Phoebe, a servant of the church at Cenchreae, that you may welcome her in the Lord in a way worthy of the saints, and help her in whatever she may need from you, for she has been a patron of many and of myself as well. Greet Priscilla and Aquila, my fellow workers in Christ Jesus, who risked their necks for my life, to whom not only I give thanks, but to all the churches of the Gentiles give thanks as well. Greet also the church in their house, that's Priscilla and Aquila, or Prissa and Aquila. Greet my beloved Epaenetus, who was the first convert to Christ in Asia. Greet Mary, who has worked hard for you. Greet Andronicus and Junia, my kinsmen and my fellow prisoners. They are well known to the apostles, and they were in Christ before me. Okay? Then he greets a few more people. Okay? And we're going to skip down to verse 16. Greet Philologus, Julia, Nereus, and his sister Olympus, and all the saints who are with them. Greet one another with a holy kiss. All the churches of Christ greet you. Okay? So that right there shows you that here's a man whom she's going to contend is misogynistic and doesn't care about women, literally greeting women and saying, hey, welcome these people into the church as you would welcome other believers. Okay? Okay? And help her in whatever she may need from you, for she has been a patron of many and of myself as well. Okay? So that's kind of, the point there is that, okay, we have this thing, okay? And this is going to be a common theme because Prissa and Aquila were very dear to Paul, okay, in his travels, okay? And he greeted them a number of times, as you'll hear throughout these letters. This is 1 Corinthians 16:19. The churches of Asia send you greetings. Aquila and Prissa, together with the church in their house, send you hearty greetings in the Lord. All the brothers send you greeting. Greet one another with a holy kiss. Okay, so he's saying the same thing that he just said in the previous letter in Romans. Okay, he's saying here that Aquila and Prissa have a church in their house. Okay, just like he did in Romans, because he said, and the church in their house. He's saying the same thing here. Send you, together with the church in their house. So literally, they were holding a church in their house. 2 women, okay? They're not the ones preaching, but they're the ones that basically opened their house to the other saints. And they were saying, hey guys, come on in. Have fun. Let's have a church service. Okay? Now, let me see here. One of the things that I wanted to bring up, before we go much further, is one of the things that a lot of people like to bring up, and this may still come up a little bit later, but basically I want to bring this up now while we're still talking about this. There's a very famous passage, okay, and I think I brought this up in the last episode anyway, but I'm going to bring it up again, because I think it's important, okay? In Ephesians 5:22 through 33, okay, 3.5 verses talk about what wives should do with their husbands. The rest of those verses deal with what the husbands are supposed to do for their wives. Okay, so let me bring this up again. Let me read 22 through 33. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of the water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of his body. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. This mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, let each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she respects her husband. Okay? So, again, if Paul was truly very misogynistic, as everyone, kind of tries to say, okay, you would find that, that much of that doesn't actually fly, okay? And so, yeah, it makes me frustrated when people try to turn around and push this narrative of, oh, these people don't really know what they're talking about. Okay. Another thing that I wanted to mention here was that in chapter 5 of 1 Timothy, okay, Paul instructs Timothy on how to honor certain types of people in the church. Okay? Do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father, younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, in all purity. The reason why we'll call each other like brothers and sisters in Christ, okay, is we get that from this, okay? Honor widows who are truly widows. But if a widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn how to show godliness to their own household, and to make some return to their parents. For this is pleasing in the sight of God. She who is truly a widow, left all alone, has set her hope on God, and continues in supplications and prayers night and day. But she who is self-indulgent is dead even while she lives. Command these things as well, so that they may be without reproach. But if anyone does not provide for his relatives, especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Okay? And then it goes on from there. But basically, you can kind of understand, okay, that, like, Paul has never said, okay, that you can't have some kind of provision for certain people, that you can't be a teacher or host a church or do something like that, but he just does not permit a woman to be a preacher, elder, overseer. Okay? Now, couple final notes here, and then we'll move on in this video, because I do want to get it done. Okay? 2 Timothy 4:19. Greet Prisca and Aquila and the household of Onesiphorus. Okay? And, so again, he's calling out, his people. Okay? And then in Philemon, okay, says Paul, this is beginning in the first, because it's only one chapter, basically. This is beginning in the first verse. Paul, a prisoner for Christ Jesus, and Timothy, our brother, to Philemon, our beloved fellow worker, and Apphia, our sister, and Archippus, our fellow soldier, and the church in your house. Okay? So again, he's coming in and he's talking about women and he's holding them in high regard. Okay, this is something that I think a lot of people forget because they focus on only the negative aspects of Paul. Oh, he said women shouldn't teach and be quiet. Oh, he said wives submit to your husbands. Oh, he said this. Oh, he said that. Yes, but he also called out women by name in his letters and said greet them as you would other saints. He baptized a woman. Okay? And lest we forget, Priscilla and Aquila took Apollos to their house and rebuked him. Now, they did it in private, okay? But they rebuked him and they taught him, okay? Here's how you preach the gospel. We understand you're zealous. Good on you. But here's how you do it. But they didn't do it in public, okay? They didn't walk up and like cuff him alongside the head and be like, no, dummy, this is how you're supposed to do it, and then start being girl bosses, okay? You don't have to be a girl boss to teach. Because you're commanded to teach your children. Okay? So are husbands. Husbands are also commanded to teach their children. Okay? Men and women are commanded as husband and wife when they have children to teach their children the ways of God. Okay? Think about it.
He showed no indication of not wanting women to speak up. He didn't tell women to be quiet. He told Mary Magdalene, go out and tell people.
No, he didn't tell Mary Magdalene to go out and tell people. We seriously need to read this again. Oh my God. See, and this is the problem with this type of stuff, is they tend to, like, magnify things beyond what it was. Jesus didn't tell Mary Magdalene, go tell the world that I'm risen. Okay? Now, he commanded the believers to go in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Okay? He gave the Great Commission, basically saying, go and, go and make disciples of all nations. Okay? Teaching them all that I've commanded you. But that was a general command, not a specific command to a specific person. What he said to Mary Magdalene was, okay, Jesus said to her, woman, why are you weeping? This is verse 15 of chapter 20 of John. Jesus said to her, woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking? Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. Jesus said to her, Mary, and she turned, and she said to him in Aramaic, Rabboni, which means teacher. Jesus said to her, do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go to my brothers, not go tell everyone, go to my brothers, the 12, and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and your God. Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, I have seen the Lord, and that he said these things to her. Okay. Then Jesus came and appeared to them. Was like, hey, peace be to you. And they're like, whoa, I guess you weren't lying. Because again, in the other gospel accounts, we know that they didn't believe her. They thought she was in shock. Okay? They were like, woman, you're speaking foolishness. Okay? You're in shock. You thought you saw Jesus. Okay, we get it. Yeah, you thought you saw Jesus. Good on you. And she's like, no, you don't understand. I saw Jesus. And then Jesus appears to him and he's like, why didn't you guys believe her? Oh. Okay. I told you I was going to come back. So, again, he's not commanding her to go out and tell everyone. He's commanding her to go tell the disciples. That's completely different. And don't get it twisted. Don't think that he is sending her out to start church plants and to become a pastor. She's just carrying the message back to Jesus' immediate followers because she knew who they were. She was with them when things went down. Okay? She'd been following Jesus and she had the demons cast out of her. Okay? So she knew who, Matthew and Peter and John and James and all of them were, okay? She knew all the disciples. So she was the ideal person to go back and tell the disciples, hey, yo, I just saw Jesus. He's right over here. And they're like, no, you didn't. Because they thought she was in shock. They thought she was imagining things. Until Jesus comes in and he's like, why didn't you believe her? I told you I was coming back. Hello? And they were like, oh, right, you did tell us that. Okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry about that. Don't confuse it. Okay? He's not telling Mary, go to the world, be a pastor, do this, do that. That's not what he's saying here. Okay? Now, could she have told other women about Jesus? Yes, I'm sure she did. Okay? Could she have opened up her home and started a church plant? Of course. Okay? Like Priscilla and Aquila did. Okay? But that is not what Jesus is telling her. This is what Kristi wants you to believe Jesus is telling her. But that's not what Jesus is actually telling her. He's just saying, go to my brothers, tell them this. So she does. And that's it. If she had been a lot more influential about that, okay, she would have been mentioned more in later accounts. She would have been mentioned in some of the letters of Peter, in some of the letters of Paul. Okay? But we don't get a lot from her in any other letters. Okay? We don't get any mentions of, hey, say to Mary Magdalene, you're awesome, or something like that. Okay? Like, you know, Peter, in 1 Peter, he says, by Silvanus, a faithful brother, I regard him. I have written briefly to you, exhorting and declaring that this is true this is the true grace of God. Stand firm in it. She who is at Babylon, who is likewise chosen, sends you greetings, and so does Mark, my son. Greet one another with the kiss of love. Peace to you, be Christ. We don't know who her is. We assume that might be like one of the other people from the church. Okay? And as far as we know, John never actually said anything about pretty much anybody, really. I mean, he didn't really do much. He just kind of like, you know, said some general things. So, yeah. And Jude didn't either. So, yeah. So, none of the other people mentioned Mary Magdalene. If she had been some kind of a spiritual giant in the church, she would have been mentioned. Okay? People like to attach so much meaning to her because she was the one that went back and told the disciples about Jesus. But in reality, she was just a glorified messenger. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that she wasn't important. I'm just saying she was a glorified messenger to carry the message back to the disciples that Jesus had risen. Because again, she was the convenient one because she stayed at the tomb, wondering where Jesus had gone, wondering where his body was. That's it. Again, don't get it twisted.
Talk, speak. But Paul comes along and he's like, we need to make sure that women stay quiet. And
No. Again, let me read what Missler said, okay? Teach. Didasko, to be a teacher. The office of a teacher. By using the present infinitive rather than the aorist infinitive, Paul does not forbid women to teach under appropriate conditions and circumstances, but not to fulfill the office and role of a pastor or teacher in the life of the church. Again, this is Missler saying this, not me. Okay? Women are permitted to teach. Older women are to teach the younger women. Titus 2, 3 and 4. We read that last time. Timothy was taught by his mother and grandmother. 2 Timothy 1:5 and 3:15. There is nothing wrong with a woman instructing a man in private, Acts 18:24-28. But a woman should not try to take the place of a man. Again, that's Missler, not me. Okay? So, and that word silence there is an unfortunate translation. Peaceable or quietness in the sense of not being meddlesome or intrusive is the same word translated peaceable in verse 2 of chapter 3, or of chapter 2 of this one. When I read this one in verse 2, where it says, "For kings and for all that are in authority, that we may lead quiet and peaceable life in all godliness and honesty." So the word that he's using there is the same word that he's using here, okay? When it says, "Let the woman learn in silence," he means actually let the woman learn in quietness or peaceableness, or be at peace in the church, okay? Paul gave a similar admonition to the church in Corinth in 1 Corinthians 14:34, primarily in regard to speaking in tongues. Now, he didn't say that they couldn't speak in tongues. He was just saying that they should just be quiet when it's happening, because people were being loud and obnoxious. That's why he was saying that. Okay? He's not saying, "Okay, all you women out there, shut up, sit down, don't do a thing." He's not saying that. He is not saying that at all. Okay? So stop with this crap.
And women cannot be teaching over men, which assumes that men can be teaching men.
Who else would they teach then? What kind of a fucking dumbass statement was that? Of course men can teach men! Duh! Oh my god. Is this woman seriously that thick? Kristi! Who the hell else are men gonna teach? I mean, honestly. Who the hell else are they gonna teach? Are you dumb? Yes, the answer is yes. Okay? But the justification for it, again, because you're absolutely idiotic about this, let a woman learn quietly with all submissiveness. I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet or peaceable. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. That's the justification for it. It's right there. And this is the problem with modern feminism. Okay? Is this. Right here. Okay? Let's take this verse out of context and then think that all Paul was trying to do was just have women sit down in the pew and do absolutely nothing. It's not what he said. He said, you sit in church, you listen to the message. He didn't say you couldn't teach Sunday school. He didn't say you couldn't teach other women. He didn't say that you couldn't teach in private men. He said you can't be a pastor. That's it. That's the only office in the church that you can't hold is pastor. And if that bothers you, I'm sorry. Maybe you should go back in time and tell Eve, don't be deceived. Because that's the only reason. But again, who the hell else are the men going to teach if they're not teaching other men as well? Are you dumb?
Can be teachers, even though, like we saw before, Jesus says don't call people a teacher.
Not that again. Are you flippin' dumb? Seriously. We already went over. They were calling the disciples teachers. Paul was called teacher on numerous occasions. And he didn't go, oh, wait a minute. No. Jesus was saying that in the context of, I'm here right now. I'm your teacher. Okay? But lest we forget, because, she's got the shortest memory in the whole damn world, because she doesn't really care about the actual Bible and what it really says. Okay? Let's go back. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee. This is 28:16 through 20. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, and to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always until the end of the age. Oh, I'm sorry, what were you lying? Jesus just commanded them to go teach. Oh! Jesus was their teacher here on earth. It's why they called him Rabbi. Rabbi means teacher, okay? And he was saying, call no one else teacher but me. Okay, because I'm your teacher right now. And after he died and rose again, he said, look, I'm no longer just your teacher. I'm your God. All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, baptize the nations. Make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teaching them all I have commanded you. Teaching them. They were called teacher. And they didn't go, no, wait a minute. Jesus told us we're not supposed to be called teacher. He told them to go teach. What do you call someone who goes and teaches? A teacher. Duh. Jesus was their teacher. That's what he was saying. He was saying, you're getting your teaching, your commands, your instructions from me. So I am your teacher on earth, here, now. And after he died and rose again, he's now saying, I am your God. Go and teach people those commands. Again, you'd have to be some kind of a biblically illiterate maroon not to understand that.
You are not a teacher. You must be a humble servant. He wanted people to be servants. He washed feet.
He washed his disciples' feet once. Don't start with this garbage about, oh, he washed feet. Once. Jesus was showing the disciples how to live. I mentioned this in my video that I did about that stupid Super Bowl ad for the He Gets Us campaign. Okay? It's not that we shouldn't be out helping people and being servants and making disciples. But we should not just be going around and washing people's feet when they're acting like all entitled. Oh, I should have my feet washed because you're a Christian and you should be washing my feet. How many other people's feet did he wash outside of the 12? Huh? Come on, Kristi. Come on, how many? How many? I'll give you the answer. That many. Outside of the 12. He had his feet washed. Twice. Okay? Once by Mary. Okay? The sister of Martha and Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead. Okay? She came in, poured some oil on his feet, and washed, kind of dried it up with her hair. Okay? And Mary Magdalene came in and cried over Jesus' feet and wiped up his feet with her hair. Those are the only instances of feet washing that we have in the gospel accounts. 3 times. Twice to Jesus, once Jesus doing it to his disciples. And that's it. I am so sick and tired of these biblically illiterate morons not understanding. They presume to lecture us, the Christians, the ones that actually know the Bible. Well, Jesus just washed feet. No, he didn't. He didn't just wash feet. In fact, I could probably look through the Gospel of Acts, or the book of Acts, and probably find, okay, all of the times that they washed feet of people. Which isn't going to be many, I can guarantee you that. Okay? Now, it's not that they weren't doing it because, they just didn't feel the need to. Okay? No one has to. That's the point. But I'm so sick and tired of this. In the inner cell, fastened their feet in, tied his own hands and feet with it, and said, "Now get up and stand on your feet." 120 feet deep, 90 feet deep. Yeah. Literally in the gospel accounts, there is no place where they washed anybody's feet. None. In the book of Acts. This is the problem with progressive Christianity, this prosperity gospel, postmodern hippie Jesus BS. Okay? Is people like her think that that's all Jesus did was just walk around, girl boss women, and, slay queen, and do this, and wash these people's feet, and just be tolerant of everybody, and don't worry about sin, it's okay. No. No.
For his sake. I was going to say Christ's sakes, but, Anyway, what a far leap from any of the teachings that we read about from Jesus in the Gospels. Now, is it possible that there are teachings that didn't make the Gospels that were being, passed on as oral tradition, and Paul heard those, and that's what he was going off of?
No. Paul was going off of the Old Testament. You biblically illiterate maroon. He was going off of the Old Testament. That's literally in the verses right after what he said. Okay? And because you don't know what the Bible says, okay, and you've never actually read the Bible, okay, I'm telling you. Because honestly, you have no flipping clue what the Bible actually says. That much is clear. Okay? Because no, there are no other teachings. And you can read all the other Gnostic Gospels out there, and you can, listen to other church fathers and other people that have talked about this stuff, and there is no other teaching on this. There never has been, and there never will be. This was Paul, okay, understanding that Jesus did not elevate any of the women in his inner circle to the level of the disciples, the men, the 12 men that he appointed to walk around with him for 3 flippin' years. Stop reading into it.
Maybe. And Jesus didn't make sure to specify, hey, make sure you treat women as kind of second class. That's really important.
Paul isn't treating women as second class. He just said you couldn't hold the office of pastor. That's it. And you'd know that if you'd read the Bible. which is obvious you haven't. And as I said before in my last part, I have been to churches with female senior pastors, with female associate pastors, with female youth pastors. Okay? I have been to many different churches in my life. And I can tell you that, okay? And yeah, there were some women pastors that are very dynamic and they're very good, okay? But that's not biblical. Because a woman is not to hold the position of senior pastor. Not that they can't teach. That word teach there, that word teach is used in conjunction with the other word have authority over. Okay? Those words in conjunction means the office of senior pastor, the office of pastor, overseer, elder. Okay? That's what it means in that context. And you'll see how much they try to eisegete into that. Oh, see, he's saying they can't teach. He's saying they can't teach. No, he's saying they can't teach and have authority over men, which means that they can't be senior pastors, according to the Bible. That's it. Doesn't say they can't go out and lead small groups, lead Bible studies. Okay? I've known many people, okay? I mean, when I was part of a young careers group at a church here where I live, that was basically for people post-college up to about 35, okay? We had a lot of female teachers in that group. People that were leading small groups of small chunks of people, okay, that were co-ed, some of them were male, some of them were female, okay? In fact, one of the groups that I was in was led by a female. She was very dynamic, okay? Some women have very good leadership skills. Not putting that in doubt. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they can be a pastor, elder, overseer. Get that through your thick heads. Okay? That's the only thing Paul is prohibiting there. Because you'll notice that in my English Standard Version here, okay, when Paul talks about this, he says in verse 11 of chapter 2 of 1 Timothy, he says, let a woman learn quietly with all submissiveness. Notice that word there. He's not saying, woman, shut up. Okay? He's saying, let her learn quietly. Again, it's the same word that in verse 2 says, for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life. That word, peaceful and quiet there, that word is the same word that they're using here for quietly in verse 11. Okay? Then in verse 12, he says, I do not permit a woman to teach or to exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. Okay? Again, she should be remaining peaceable. Okay? Doesn't mean that she can't run a Sunday school class. Doesn't mean that she can't be a youth pastor. Doesn't mean that she can't go and do other things in the church. She can't run Bible studies. Nothing like... Paul's not forbidding that. He's just forbidding her for being the overseer, elder, pastor role. That's what that phrase means right there. Okay? Because, I mean, lest we forget, in verse 8 of chapter 2, he says, I desire then that every place the men should pray, lifting holy hands without anger or quarreling. How many of you pray holding your hands up? I don't. So, this whole notion of, well, Jesus didn't come right out and say it, is BS. Okay?
So Paul is adding to the words of Jesus. He's making up his own rules.
No,
and to
he's
me,
not.
These all feel so contradictory to the overall theming, the overall message of Jesus.
Only if you believe in the postmodern hippie Jesus that believes in peace, love, and tolerance, man. That's not the biblical Jesus, because if you actually read the words of Jesus, and then you read the words of Paul, you'll find out they're right in line with each other. It's her who's taking it out of context, okay, and throwing crap out there and being like, oh, see, Paul said this, and Jesus said this, and see, Jesus is this person, and Paul's this person, he's so bad, man. No. Paul never said any of the stuff that she claimed. We've proven that. At least, not the way that she claims that he said it. Because when you read it in context, and then you go back and you read some of the other words of Jesus that she's trying to contend that, because it's like when you read certain parts of it and then you go back and read other parts of it, you start to realize, oh, Jesus actually did say some of the things that Paul said. Oops. But this is a fallacy that many, many, many atheists and agnostics come out and make. Well, Jesus didn't come right out and say that, that you shouldn't do this, or he never said this, or he never said that. Just because he doesn't said it doesn't mean that it wasn't true. Because his actions also speak louder than his words. And he never elevated a woman to a position in his inner circle of 12 men. So, sorry about that. Because by his own action, Jesus is actually affirming what Paul is saying about a woman not permitting a woman to teach or have authority over a man.
According to the Gospels. To me, reading the words of Jesus and then reading the words of Paul, the two, I feel like they butt heads.
Again, only if you're a biblically illiterate maroon like her, and you're eisegeting so hard into the text to try to find something where you can stand there and say, see, Paul's some kind of a false apostle because he was totally at odds with Jesus, even though he really wasn't.
Who's going to win, Jesus or Paul?
Well, Jesus already won. Paul's just affirming what Jesus said and that Jesus won. So, your argument is invalid, Kristi.
Well, I know who won out in the modern church, and that's Paul. Paul won out because...
No. Oh, you absolutely biblically illiterate maroon. Flip into your contents for a minute, okay? Look at the New Testament section, okay? We have 4 books about Jesus, okay? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right? 4 books about Jesus, okay? And I'm willing to bet that you walk into a church on any given Sunday, most of your sermons are probably going to come out of one of those 4 books. Okay? Especially like around Easter time. Okay? People aren't teaching Paul. People aren't teaching Romans or anything else. Okay? Now, the next book is the book of Acts written by Luke. Okay? Luke and Acts are written in the same style. Okay? Because Luke is compiling these 2 books to take to Rome to kind of get his friend Paul off the hook. Again, see this movie, Paul the Apostle of Christ. Because Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ, okay, plays Luke in this movie, and he is excellent. Okay, or plays Luke, and it's really, really well done. Then we have the letters of Paul, which comprise Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, and Philemon. Okay? Then we have Hebrews, which was written by an anonymous author in the style of Paul. Then we have James, who was the brother of Jesus. Then we have 1st and 2nd Peter. Then we have 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. Then we have Jude. Then we have Revelation. Okay? So out of the New Testament, the bulk of the New Testament books are written by one man. And that's Paul. Okay? Now, before the women's lib movement, okay, in the West, before all this, first wave feminism, okay, in the West, women were content to go to church, bring their kids home, sit them down, teach them whatever they needed to be taught about the Bible, and then move on with their lives. But after the women's lib movement, after World War I, in the 60s, after World War II, in the 60s, okay, late 50s, early 60s, you started having second wave feminism. You had the women burning their bras, you had the women wanting to have more freedom, you had women wanting to do more stuff. And that's where the problems in America started. Okay? And what they started to do is they started to attack this book. And why would they attack this book? Because they feel that it's holding them back. When it's not. It's really not. The only thing it does, the only two things that Paul says, okay, that are real commands to women are A, wives, submit to your husbands, okay, and respect your husbands, and B, I do not permit a woman to teach or have authority over a man, or basically hold the office of elder, overseer, pastor. Show me anything else, chapter and verse, okay, outside of those two things, where Paul is disparaging women. Go ahead, I'll wait. It's not in there. It's not.
The churches love to quote Paul more than they love to quote Jesus.
Not really. What they do is they use the letters of Paul to back up the words of Jesus. And you'd know this if you went to a church that taught out of the Bible, and B, had actually read your Bible, Kristi. And because you haven't done either of those, you're so biblically illiterate that you've built up this straw man of who Jesus is and who Paul is, and you're trying to have them fight. Like two stuffed animals. See, they're fighting. That's not real. Because Paul hasn't won out of anything. Because anyone with any ounce of biblical literacy knows that Paul was quoting Jesus verbatim in some instances. Okay? And he was doing it years before the Gospels were ever written. Literally, like some of his letters to Romans and the church in Corinth and, Colossians and stuff, he's quoting Jesus verbatim in some instances. When you go back and read the gospel accounts, you'll start to go, holy crap. how did Paul know? He talked to the disciples. Okay? All 12 of them. And he talked to the witnesses that were there. Okay? It's because they were an oral culture. For the most part. In the first century church. And then, towards the end of the first century, they realized we should probably start writing this stuff down. So they did. Peter told Mark. Matthew wrote his own gospel. Luke wrote the book of Luke and Acts. And John wrote his gospel. Okay? While he was in Ephesus. Okay? Then he wrote his letters around the time that he was in exile. And then while he was out on the Isle of Patmos, okay, he wrote Revelation. Okay? So the point is that how would Paul have known? Because the thing is that there was no record outside of the eyewitness accounts of the disciples. And if Paul is going and telling the Romans, telling the churches in Corinth and Ephesus and Philippi, here's what we're telling you, here's how we're doing things. And he is, again, in some cases, quoting things, commands that Jesus gave the disciples verbatim in his letters. Okay? And then later on, we're seeing those being written down by the disciples themselves. You can only come to one conclusion. The disciples were there. And they knew what Jesus said. And they told Paul. And Paul wrote it down in his letters. Because he was sitting there writing out his letters to a church and he was like, what was that Peter said? Oh, that's right, Peter said this about Jesus. Right, okay, so I'll put that in there. What was it that Levi, the tax collector, his name was Matthew, I think? What did he say? Oh yeah, he said this. Again, you'd have to be super biblically illiterate not to understand this. Because again, she is building up a straw man of who Paul was and who Jesus was, okay, according to her own worldly sensibilities, and she's having them fight together. I always like to use this analogy when I say that. If you remember this Ang Lee Hulk movie, okay, there's a point where young Bruce Banner has these two little stuffed animals. Like, he's got a stuffed animal, and for Christmas one year, his dad buys him a second stuffed animal, and he loves to sit there, and he'll just be like, oh, 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 and he'll do all these, because he's playing by himself, okay? He just, because it's the only way that he can kind of get out some of his aggressions and stuff like that, because he was just very bottled up as a child, if you know the story, okay? And so to me, I just think of, like, Kristi with these, like, two straw man dolls of Paul and Jesus going, you suck, Jesus, no, you suck, Paul, I mean, it's just like, it's so dumb, because she doesn't even know basic scripture. And because she's eisegeting into the text so hard, instead of letting the text exegete, she doesn't even realize that in every single instance that she brought up, they were not in conflict with each other. They were actually right in line with each other. It's just that she was quoting something from something completely different, and yet then she goes over here and talks about something that's totally over here, talking about something completely different, and then taking that out of context, and then putting the two together and going, oh, they don't mesh. Yeah, because he's talking like Jesus was talking to people on a hillside. I'm thinking in reference to when she was talking about how Paul, how Jesus would talk about have blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy, and then how Paul was like condemning people for blasphemy. And she's like, oh, over here, Paul's saying that he has the only gospel, and that if you don't preach that gospel, oh, you're damned. That's because there's only one gospel. And even Jesus said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And he also condemned blasphemy. He didn't take blasphemy kindly, okay? And there were plenty of times when he was called a blasphemer for saying he was God and forgiving sins. So, again, she just doesn't understand the basics of the gospel accounts. She has no concept of what the Gospels say, or even what the letters of Paul say. She is cherry-picking in the extreme and then eisegeting into it to try to make it sound like they're so at odds.
They love using the rules and the regulations and all the things that Paul told them to do. And
that's because Paul was setting up how to have an organized church. Okay? I mean, why do you think we have laws in our country, Kristi? Do you think anarchy's better? Because that's what was happening in the churches. There was total anarchy. People were running around and jumping around and screaming and yelling and doing all this stuff. And the person who was supposed to be running the church was like, I don't get what's going on here. What should I do? And so he talked to Timothy. Timothy wrote to Paul. Paul wrote back to Timothy. And that's what we got. He was laying out how to organize a church. Have an overseer. Have a deacons. Have, do this, do that. It's literally how to organize a church. And it's how every church has been organized down through history. Literally every single church has been organized according to 1 Timothy forever. And the mere fact that you don't know this, Kristi, means you have no clue what the Bible says. You are so ignorant on the Bible, it isn't even funny anymore. It is downright scary how ignorant you truly are. And I'm not saying that lightly, and I'm not saying that to be funny. I'm saying that as, ouch. This should make your brain hurt, especially if you're a Christian. Especially if you've even had an ounce of biblical discernment and have read the Scriptures. Again, I'm not a pastor. Okay? I'm not some biblical scholar here. I'm just a regular Joe that the Lord called to do apologetics. I didn't go out there and find Kristi's channel and be like, oh, I need to debunk her. Oh, she's so bad. No. The Lord put this video in my feed and said, do that one. I said, okay. And I started doing this one, and I'm going, oh my goodness, is this person ignorant. So much so that she doesn't even know probably 0.1% of what the Scriptures actually say. And I'm not joking about that. Because she is cherry-picking so much that she doesn't even know what the Scriptures are actually saying. That is astonishing to me. The amount of mental gymnastics it takes to get to this level of biblical ignorance is astounding. That should make you worry about the state of Christianity in the Western world. I'm not talking about just America. I'm talking about the Western world. Okay? That people are so ignorant of the Bible that they call themselves Christians. They've never read it. They cherry pick it. They eisegete it. Look at my other one on the Bible verses for flat earth. that guy's doing the same exact thing as her. That is horrendous. That should never happen. Ever. Folks, this has to stop. And I admonish you, as a brother in Christ, read your scriptures. Okay? Read them. Know what they say. And if you go to church and you're hearing a pastor that is not preaching from this, run. Don't walk. Run from that church. Get the hell out of there as fast as you can. And go find yourself a church where they preach from this. Let's finish this up.
Paul told them to be. They like focusing on that way more than they like the idea of just being humble servants and loving people. So I definitely want to do a deeper dive on Paul. If you are interested in that and interested in hearing my thoughts and theories.
No, I don't think any Christian is actually interested in your thoughts and theories on this. Okay? Because it is evident that you have no idea who Paul was. You have no idea what the Bible actually says. And you have no clue, Kristi, about history or even what this says. I'm going to read you one last passage. Okay? Then we'll call it an episode. This is a passage that you should memorize. Okay? Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and, having done all, to stand firm. Stand, therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and, as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. In all circumstances take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit, with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints, and also for me, that words may be given to me in opening my mouth boldly to proclaim the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that I may declare it boldly as I ought to speak. How sharp is your sword? This is the sword. Okay? The word of God. Word of God. Okay? If you don't know it, you better start reading it. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, drop a comment below, let me know what you thought of this series. This is the final one in this series. I have another one in the wings, so we'll get to that. Next week, though, I will be getting into the Sword and Sorcery LP, because I promised that I was going to do like 2 weeks of apologetic stuff, and then I would do like my Sword and Sorcery LP, because I know I've been saying that I wanted to continue with that, and so we're going to continue with that. So as we say, we will see you on the next one.